Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I am Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. In India, Kerala is set to become the fifth state to bypass the Narendra Modi government's farm laws. Meanwhile, farm unions have agreed to hold talks with the centre tomorrow and demand the repeal of agriculture reforms. For over a month now, farmers have been protesting at Delhi borders against law they say favour corporations. In Bangladesh, some 1,800 more Rohingya refugees are on their way to the remote island of Bhasanchar in the Bay of Bengal. Dhaka is going ahead with the relocation process in defiance of safety concerns from rights groups. The island is flood-prone, vulnerable to frequent cyclones and could be completely submerged during a high tide. China has reported major progress in talks with the European Union to clinch an investment deal. In a daily press briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said Beijing hopes for a pact soon. This comes after US President-elect Joe Biden called for stronger coalitions against China on the trade and economic fronts. In Somalia, 9 people have been killed after a landmine hit a vehicle carrying civilians in the lower Juba region. Authorities say the incident took place in the northeast of Dobli town near the border with Kenya. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. The global coronavirus cases have surpassed 81 million with more than 1.7 million deaths. In Spain, the virus has claimed more than 50,000 lives and infected 1.8 million people. Meanwhile, India has reported 6 cases of the new variant linked to the United Kingdom, and Pakistan has recorded 63 deaths and more than 1,700 infections overnight. There are nearly 10,000 fatalities and over 475,000 cases across the country. Pakistan needs 302 runs to win the first test against New Zealand at Bay Oval in Mount Maunganui. The visitors ended day 4 at 71 runs for 3 wickets. The Kiwis set a target of 373 runs after declaring their second innings at 180 for 5 on the 4th day of the match. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. In India, Kerala is set to become the 5th state to bypass the Narendra Modi government's farm laws. A special assembly session will be held on December 31st when a resolution to not implement the laws is likely to get the nod of the Kerala legislature. 3 Congress-ruled states of Punjab, Chhattisgarh and Rajasthan have already bypassed the centre's agriculture reforms. Delhi became the 4th state earlier this month to follow the example by rejecting all 3 laws, after Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal tore the copies of the bills in a special session. Meanwhile, farm unions have agreed to hold talks with the centre tomorrow and demand the repeal. For over a month now, farmers have been protesting at Delhi borders against reforms they say favour corporations. Now moving on to Bangladesh, some 1,800 more Rohingya refugees are on their way to the remote island of Bhasanchar in the Bay of Bengal. Dhaka is going ahead with the relocation in defiance of safety concerns from rights groups. More than 1,600 Rohingya were moved to the island earlier in this month. The UN says it has not been involved in the relocation to the island, which only emerged from the sea 20 years ago. It has urged the Bengali government to ensure that no refugee is forced to move. Dhaka says the relocation is voluntary, but some refugees from the first group have spoken about being coerced to go. In Somalia, 9 people have been killed after a landmine hit a vehicle carrying civilians in the lower Juba region. Authorities said the incident took place in the northeast of Tobli town near the border with Kenya. They said a woman and an infant were also among those killed. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. It came just hours after 4 people were shot dead in Mogadishu's Waberi neighborhood. 3 French soldiers have been killed in Mali after an improvised explosive device hit their armored vehicle. In a statement, the French presidency said Paris is determined to continue the fight against terrorism. President Emmanuel Macron said he shared the pain of the families of soldiers and expressed his condolences. He praised the efforts of the troops in restoring peace and stability to the troubled region. Defense Minister Florence Parly said the soldiers were in an area where terrorist groups attacked civilians. 44 other French soldiers have been killed since January 2013 after they began their mission in the Sahel region. Turkey says it has killed 2 militants of the Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Iraq. The Defense Ministry says they were killed during an aerial operation in the Avisan-Basian region. The ministry said 8 other PKK militants were also killed on the same day. It said Turkish forces will not stop operations against militants in the region. Earlier, the ministry said 20 PKK militants were killed in northern Syria as well. The global coronavirus cases have surpassed 81 million with more than 1.7 million deaths. In Spain, the virus has claimed more than 50,000 lives and infected 1.8 million people. Meanwhile, India has reported 6 cases of the new variant linked to the United Kingdom. Details in the following report.
The coronavirus is not an end in itself. As the World Health Organization warns, the pandemic can be a wake-up call for worse to come. Experts say infections, hospitalizations and deaths in 2021 from the virus may exceed those in 2020 in the absence of a substantial vaccine rollout. In the U.S. virus hotspot of California, authorities are extending strict stay-at-home orders as hospitals remain overwhelmed. The U.S. forces in Japan and South Korea have started to receive vaccines way before the host countries start their inoculation programs. Meanwhile, officials say the Novavax vaccine can be stored at standard refrigerated temperatures.
We now have 6 months. We now have 6 months of data showing that Novavax's vaccine can be stored at just standard refrigerator temperatures. And that's going to make it much easier to be able to get distribution globally, which is why we have plants set up around the world.
Russia says its coronavirus death toll is more than 3 times higher than previously reported. Meanwhile, the UK's armed forces will help roll out mass testing to secondary schools and colleges to help students return safely in January. While a study shows that the highly infectious variant circulating in Britain is linked to higher levels of the virus in the blood, the NHS says health workers are back in the eye of the storm as coronavirus cases surge at the end of a tough year.
This has probably been the toughest year that most of us can remember. That's certainly true across the health service, where we've been responding to the worst pandemic in a century. Many of us will have lost family, friends, colleagues, and at a time of year when normally we would be celebrating, a lot of people are understandably feeling anxious, frustrated and tired.
In Asia, India has reported 6 cases of the UK variant of coronavirus. South Korea reported a record 40 daily deaths as the country grapples with a 3rd wave of infections. Seoul says it will sign a deal with Moderna to offer vaccines for 20 million people. Meanwhile, an outbreak has again been reported in China's capital Beijing with 15 new cases overnight.
Now moving on to Pakistan, 63 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. This takes the country's death toll to over 9,992. The health ministry reported over 1,700 new cases overnight. Officials say out of over 475,000 countrywide cases, more than 425,000 people have recovered. The National Command and Operations Center says the number of active cases crossed 50,000 in November, but the cases fell by 10,000 in 1 month to over 39,000 as of today. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Civil Aviation Authority has extended restrictions on inbound UK travel till January 4th. The ban has been imposed due to the new variant of coronavirus in Britain. China says that it hopes Nepal can see the big picture and properly manage differences. This comes after a senior Chinese official visited Kathmandu after the dissolution of Nepali parliament. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian urged relevant parties to take into account the national interest. At a press briefing, he said the high-level visit seeks to bolster cooperation on epidemic prevention, state governance and development. Zhao said Beijing is ready to work with Nepal's political parties to strengthen the bilateral relationship. Nepal is part of China's Belt and Road Initiative project, which is seen as a new Silk Road. The U.S. House of Representatives has voted to increase coronavirus stimulus checks from $600 to $2,000. President Donald Trump had demanded the increase. The Democrat-led House passed the bill 275 to 134 with support from over 40 Republicans. Meanwhile, the House also voted overwhelmingly to override Trump's veto of the $740 billion defense bill. 109 Republicans joined the Democrats in the 322-87 vote. Although Democrats have a narrow majority in the House, both votes require two-thirds support to pass. The Republican-led Senate will now decide the fate of the bills. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden says America's security agencies suffered enormous damage under Donald Trump. Biden was speaking in Delaware after he was briefed by members of his national security and defense teams. He said roadblocks to communication between his transition team and agency officials can undermine national security. Biden said his team encountered obstruction from political leadership, notably at the Department of Defense. The president-elect termed this as nothing short of irresponsibility by the outgoing administration. Arguing against Trump's America First policy, Biden said the U.S. needs global alliances to deal with challenges. He added that the policy processes were weakened and U.S. alliances fell to disrepair.
From others, most notably the Department of Defense, we encountered obstruction from the political leadership of that department. And the truth is, many of the agencies that are critical to our security have incurred enormous damage. Many of them have been hollowed out in personnel, capacity, and in morale, in the policy processes that have atrophied or have been sidelined, in the despair of our alliances and the disrepair of those alliances.
The European Union says a trade deal struck with Britain provides stability for people and companies. Talking to reporters, EU Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier called the agreement a relief. He said Brussels has delivered an orderly Brexit, but there are still some elements which need consideration. Barnier said that the EU needs to review foreign policy cooperation in its future relationships with London. Spain says the main hurdle in talks with Britain over Gibraltar's post-Brexit status is keeping cross-border traffic fluid. Madrid and London are negotiating how to police the land border between Spain and Gibraltar, a British overseas territory. In an interview, Foreign Minister Arantxa González-Laya said her government seeks to avoid long lines of cars and trucks. She said Madrid has secured an exemption for 8,500 cross-border workers from border controls, even if no agreement on free movement is reached. The territory on the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula has been excluded from a last-minute Brexit deal. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and I'm moving on to Venezuela. President Nicolas Maduro has termed extension of the National Assembly as unconstitutional. In a televised appearance, Maduro said the self-proclaimed term extensions were not warranted. Maduro called on the country's judicial system to do its job with an iron fist. The National Assembly, overseen by opposition leader Juan Guaido, voted to extend its term into next year over the weekend. The parliament's move came as dozens of legislators fled the country amid criminal investigations. Many others have discontinued their service in the Congress, fearing persecution by the government. Now moving on to Belarus, the All-Belarusian People's Assembly will meet for the 6th time next year to discuss constitutional reforms. President Alexander Lukashenko issued a decree to convene what he calls a body of direct democracy. Lukashenko said representatives of all groups of society will take part in the convention on 11th and 12th February. He said a wide public dialogue on necessary constitutional amendments will be carried out due to external pressure. The opposition groups have rejected the initiative and reiterated that new elections should be held. Belarus is facing immense pressure from within and outside after rigging allegations in the August elections. In Yemen, an emergency vaccination campaign against cholera is underway in the southeastern province of Hadramaut. The World Health Organization reported over 167,000 cases, with 48 associated deaths from January to August this year. Officials say outbreaks were reported in winter in the remote Hadr district the first time in decades. They say UNICEF, WHO, and Yemen's health authorities have joined forces to fight the disease. The campaign focuses on 40,000 people in the district's rural and urban regions. The UN has declared Yemen as the worst case of a humanitarian crisis fueled by the war since 2015. The Trump administration has appealed the order blocking restrictions on Chinese-owned app TikTok. Earlier, Judge Carl Nichols prevented the Commerce Department from barring data hosting within the U.S. The Justice Department said it was appealing to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. A separate appeals court is set to hear a plea in February of a similar ruling by a Pennsylvania judge in October. Earlier this month, Trump refused to grant ByteDance an extension to divest TikTok's U.S. assets. ByteDance has been in talks to finalize a deal with Walmart and Oracle Corporation to shift the assets to a new entity. In the U.S. state of Ohio, a white police officer has been fired for fatally shooting an armed black man last week in Columbus. In a statement, the city's public safety director, Ned Pettis, said the act did not live up to the oath of a police officer. The dismissal of Adam Coy follows the recommendation of City Police Chief Thomas Quinlan. Quinlan called it an unreasonable use of deadly force. He said 47-year-old Andrew Morris Hill was a victim of an act of senseless violence. Hill was shot to death in the garage of a house where he had been staying as a guest in Ohio's capital. His death marks the second fatal shooting of a black in a month by Columbus law enforcement officers. A separate state-level criminal probe of the shooting is ongoing. In the U.S., Full House actor Lori Loughlin was released from a California prison after completing a 2-month sentence. Officials say she paid bribes to secure spots for her daughters at a top U.S. university. Loughlin had reported to the low-security Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin in October. Prosecutors say she and her fashion designer husband, Massimo Giannoli, paid $500,000 in bribes. After initially fighting the charges, they pleaded guilty in May to conspiracy to commit wire and mail fraud. Giannoli is serving a 5-month sentence at a prison in Lompoc, California. He will be released in April. A spa in Cairo has introduced a massage that is not for the faint-hearted. It uses live snakes known for relieving muscle pain and soothing joints. Details in the following report.
Soothing tunes play in a small Cairo spa room as live snakes slither on the backs and faces of customers looking for pain relief. Masseurs first rub oil on clients' backs and then use a combination of pythons or around 28 different types of non-venomous snakes for those partaking in the adrenaline-fueled 30-minute session. Dea Zain came across the news service while browsing through his social media and was instantly eager to try it.
After the snakes were placed on my back, I felt a sense of relief and rejuvenation. I was nervous at first, scared of snakes being on my body, but the fear, anxiety and tension were reduced and the session gave a sense of relaxation as the snakes went over my back, and having them there boosted my self-confidence.
Spa owner Safwat Setki says snake massages are also proven to reduce muscle and joint pain while improving blood circulation and releasing endorphins. However, it should not be used as a substitute for regular medical care or doctor's visits.
When we first introduced the session, a lot of people were afraid. They said, "Snakes? How can you use snakes?" But once we started explaining to the people the benefits of this massage, which I already mentioned, the idea was accepted by a lot of people, especially those who have a phobia or fear of snakes.
Setki started by offering the session for free to those wishing to try it, but now charges around $6 for the 20 or 30-minute session.
First snowfall in the Himalayan region of India overnight brought joy to tourists, but it also intensified the cold wave in the upper belt of the country. Details in the following report. Winter shore is a sight to savor in the Himalayas, the highest mountain range in the world. A fresh blizzard dusted the peaks overnight and brought out tourists to frolic with the snow. Officials say all roads in the upper city of Shimla were blocked due to snowfall. However, some in Rajouri were made operational after clearing snow in the morning.
Recently, there was heavy snowfall along the Pir Panjal range. Today, the valley also received heavy snowfall. The cold wave has intensified very strongly because of the snowfall.
The snowfall in Shimla continued overnight, taking the temperatures to sub-zero levels in the surrounding areas as well.
We came here yesterday morning and it was very sunny. We didn't think it would get this cold all of a sudden today. When we woke up in the morning and came to the ridge, everything was white. We are enjoying the snow.
The Indian Meteorological Department has warned of a further cold wave across the country, with more snow and rains forecast till the new year. Now moving on to the business stories, Pakistan says the country's economy is strengthening swiftly despite the coronavirus pandemic. Minister for Industries and Production Hamad Azhar says macroeconomic indicators are increasing due to prudent policies. Talking to media, the minister said the government has announced diverse packages for business owners. He said the construction of new factories will increase job opportunities. Now moving on to China has reported major progress in talks with the European Union to clinch an investment deal. This comes after US President-elect Joe Biden called for stronger coalitions against China on the trade and economic fronts. In a daily press briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said Beijing hopes for a pact soon. Earlier, EU officials said the bloc is likely to clinch a deal with China this week. They said the agreement will give firm better access to the China market and improve competition conditions. European stocks are trading higher following an overnight rally in US talks. London's FTSE 100 is leading the gains, adding over 2%. The Pan-European Stock 600 has edged up over 1%. Frankfurt's DAX has risen by almost 1%. The CAC 40 in Paris has also added nearly 1%, while Italy's FTSE MIB edged up marginally. Earlier, most Asian bourses traded higher, except for mainland Chinese shares. Pakistan need 302 runs to win the first test against New Zealand at Bay Oval in Mount Maunganui. The visitors ended day 4 at 71 runs for 3 wickets. Azhar Ali is still on the crease at 34 along with Fawad Alam at 21. The Kiwis set a target of 373 runs after declaring their second innings at 180 for 5 on the 4th day of the match. Meanwhile, Tim Southee has become the 3rd New Zealander to take 300 wickets in Test cricket. In football, Aston Villa drew 1-1 against Chelsea in their Premier League encounter at Stamford Bridge. Anwar El Ghazi scored his 5th goal in as many games as Aston Villa came from behind to earn a point. French striker Oliver Giroud put Chelsea in the lead, heading in a cross by Ben Chilwell in the 34th minute. The goal was Giroud's 3rd in 4 league starts this season. Villa drew level in the 50th minute when El Ghazi sided-foot a volley through the legs of Chelsea's goalkeeper. With the point, Villa moved to 5th place on the league table, levelled on 26 points with Chelsea on 6th. Meanwhile, the contest between Manchester City and Everton was postponed after City reported new COVID-19 cases. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.